What's up, everybody? It's your boy True Wolf God. Welcome back to another video. Hope you're doing good, being safe, and all the other good stuff. We're locking into A Little Nightmares 3 because it's coming out next year, and I can't wait for it. It's gonna be so good. And let's get into the video. Hope you enjoy it.
Little Nightmares 3 is coming next year, and as we get closer to the release, we are being given more clues about the mysterious world the game takes place in. In fact, we've been given more insight into this place than ever before, and the game hasn't even released yet. While many people are combing through the trailers looking for scraps of lore to analyze, I've been looking more closely at what's happening outside of the gameplay. You see, among these clues we have some pretty massive implications for the story, but nobody seems to be talking about them. That's where your favourite bald British theorist comes in. I
Okay.
am your favourite, right?
Um.
I might have genuinely figured out the world of Little Nightmares. With some clues from the audio series and trailers, I think I finally understand what the series is all about. But all of this after a word from our sponsors. Little Nightmares 3 is going to introduce us to two brand new, maybe, characters, Low and Alone, and it's going to
Okay.
take place in a very specific part of the nowhere. That's the name of the nightmare world in which the games are set. The third game is going to take place somewhere known as the Spiral. Now this name has some pretty interesting implications that we'll come onto later, but this isn't the only new location that the third game has introduced. We've also been introduced to a place known as the Counties. This is a place we got some insight into the Sounds of Nightmares podcast, but we're also going to get more information about this place in the upcoming comic series. The Counties lies outside of the Nowhere, and it's heavily implied to be our world, or at least a mirror of it. The name, the Counties, could be a reference to England, which is itself split up into different counties. You might even know
Okay.
two of them. Lancashire and Yorkshire were two that fought in the War of the Roses, at least one of the major inspirations for Game of Thrones. But this is even supported by the fact that both Noon and her counsellor Otto, the two main characters of the Sounds of Nightmares, have English accents.
They're all eyes too.
Yes, Americans, I said English and not British. It's time you learnt the difference. But the Sounds of Nightmares has heavily hinted that children from the counties, and presumably other places in that world, travel to the Nowhere in their nightmares. They are brought there by the mysterious ferryman, but while there, these children seem to be tempted by something to stay. This is what eventually happens to Noon. Ironically, she named herself Noon, which spells no one,
Oh.
which is exactly what she becomes at the end of the audio series. She's a nobody, another missing child, just another case file. Now this seems like something that the comic series is going to delve into further. One of the characters is a detective, and we can see that missing children is going to be a big theme.
I really want to say this is interesting because I didn't know this. I didn't know. Um, so pretty cool. Learning a lot of new things. I did keep up on some things, but I didn't really. I didn't want to keep my mind going when it comes to this series because I really wanted it to come sooner. So like if I kept on searching and looking for more stuff, I'm just gonna be more and more like, damn, the time not going fast enough. I'm trying to see the new stuff already type stuff. So I try to keep my mind busy with other things. Um, but yeah, knowing this stuff is lit. I ain't gonna lie to you. So let's keep on going. Let's keep on going.
Now it doesn't take a genius to figure this one out. We know that at least some of these missing children were likely swallowed up by the Nowhere, sinking further and further into their dreams until they were eventually taken for good. Not only is this an incredibly creepy plot, a nightmare world stealing children for who knows what reason, but this also explains why we can see several children in Little Nightmares who don't seem to be from this world. We now have a concrete reason why these children seem too small to fit in. That's because they don't. And this could even explain why the residents of this world react so aggressively to them. Even they understand that they don't belong here. But here is where we have to address the elephant in the room. So far, Little Nightmares 3 has been delving far more deeply into the lore of the series. We have seen more concrete evidence than we ever have before. Now,
Okay.
this could be worrying. If you didn't know, Little Nightmares 1 and 2 were developed by Tarsier Studio. They were the creative geniuses behind this series, but they eventually moved on to develop another game, a game which we now know is called Reanimal, a game that I am absolutely looking forward to. But Little Nightmares 3 was passed by its publisher, Bandai Namco, over to developer Supermassive Games. With this new developer and this new lore direction, we also got a trailer that looked very different to what we'd seen before. Now, I know I was certainly a little worried, and honestly, I still am. A change in developer is always a giant risk.
It
But the
is.
more that I thought about it, the more these new additions to the lore started to fit in. A lot
Okay.
of these new things are not only additions to Little Nightmares 3, but they also tie into the previous games in a far more tangible way than I thought. But all of this stemmed from one major clue. One of the main locations we will visit in Little Nightmares 3 is the Candy Factory.
Oh,
Now we got a closer look at this area and the supervisor who runs it in the latest trailer. But I think that this place has some huge significance to the overall story. We can see that the Candy Factory is producing, well, candy. Now that isn't necessarily anything strange. We know that the residents of this world need to eat, and we've already seen that some of them are incredibly hungry, so
yeah.
sure. But one of the many pieces of candy we have seen this factory produce is something that we have seen before. These spiral-shaped lollipops. In Little
Okay.
Nightmares 2, we had a comic series that centered around 6
Oh,
children.
I remember
There was
that.
one that we affectionately
Okay, yeah, I do remember this. I did see this. This is really interesting. Um, the nosebleed on. Okay, okay. I know this one is the second one. Well, basically the first one because that game is before the first game. So basically, he's the first one, and is the second one. Okay, let's continue.
named the Lollipop Kid. This young fellow carried around one of these sweets that we now see being produced. He even used it as a weapon at one point, and I theorise that we might have heard this boy in Little Nightmares too. Think about it, if the teacher was smacking one of the porcelain children, then it would have shattered. But now we know exactly where this lollipop came from. Either this child visited the factory, or maybe a shop that sold them. Now you might think that
Mm,
this is just a callback, a reference to an object that exists in the universe and nothing more. However, I think there is a deeper meaning here, not only
okay.
with this lollipop, but with the candy factory in general. We can actually see that Little Nightmares 3 is indirectly referencing past events. We see the giant baby that was a concept from Little Nightmares 2. We see mirrors are playing a big role. I have theorized that one of the new characters could be one of the comic book children from Little Nightmares 2, and now we see the source of this candy in the world.
Hmm. But like, right there here is different though. I guess because the helmet and everything. But like, didn't she die in the comic book? Didn't she get killed by that dude that was on the wall that we see in the second the the, the second game, but basically the first game, we burn him. I'm pretty sure. But right, she dies before that happens. I could be wrong though, but like I'm pretty sure. I'm not pretty sure. Like I'm like 50%, probably like 40% sure. Like I I think she dies. I'm
Be
not.
one of the
I could be
comic book
wrong.
children from Little Nightmares 2, and now we see the source of this candy in the world too. But this isn't the only connection to the past games. Now that we know that children are coming to the nowhere from another world, all those children we've seen before start to make more sense. As I alluded to earlier, there definitely seems to be some sort of entity that lives in the nowhere. This is something that the Sounds of Nightmares audio series discusses, but I theorize that it is actually luring children to this world.
Okay.
Like in many fairy tales, children are often lured away to be eaten or killed. The Pied
True.
Piper tells of a tale of a man who lured children away with music, and Hansel and Gretel tells the story of children being lured to their deaths with candy.
True.
Now, suddenly these children from the Little Nightmares 2 comic series make sense. These are all children that have been lured into the nowhere, missing children from the other world.
Okay.
But this also solves one of my old theories. I once made a theory about the detective in Little Nightmares 2. The concept art showed this character that is clearly some sort of detective or private investigator. I even theorized that he was investigating the missing children in the nowhere. At this point, we were still under the assumption that this world could have been a normal one that got corrupted by the signal tower, and we know that the Thin Man was abducting children, taking them there. But now, with the clues we have been given, it all makes sense. These concept art pieces are fragments of memories from the real world. This investigation did happen, but it was more likely an investigation into all the missing children in the real world. Children that mysteriously vanished never to be seen again, just like Noon. But now you can probably see what I'm getting at. Some mysterious entity in this world is luring children to stay. Just like in Hansel and Gretel, it might be finding creative ways to do it, such as with candy. This entire factory might just be one of the ways this dark force makes the Nowhere more tempting. Look at how many toys are littered around the Nowhere. These clearly aren't being made for the children here. Kids in the Nowhere are, well, eaten and stuff. It seems more likely that these things are only here to tempt the children that dream of this place to stay.
The toys on the first shelf were very old, but deeper shelves held the same toys I had back home, and deeper ones held exactly those I'd wished for. Suddenly, a staticky whisper said, "I'll play with you."
But this mystery goes even deeper when you consider what the Nowhere really is. This world is often described as a nightmare world, and we now know that that is actually more accurate than we thought. We learn in the Sounds of Nightmares that these children do indeed travel to this world in their dreams, but we also have huge hints that the Nowhere is created by, or at least influenced by, the mind. We see that at first, Noon travels to the Nowhere while asleep. She needs to be in a deep sleep cycle for this to happen. Of course, if she wakes, she's no longer in the Nowhere. So this mechanism is buried deep within her subconscious, within her mind's eye. But as she spends more and more time in this place, it eventually begins to physically change her. It's later revealed that she has developed a tumor in her brain in the shape of an eye, the symbol that we see absolutely everywhere in the Nowhere. Okay, that phrase actually hurt my brain. But as this progresses, Noon begins to physically disappear in her sleep, something that Otto manages to witness for himself. It seems that as Noon gives more of herself to the Nowhere starts to take root in her mind. Which does make sense. Her mind is how she accesses the Nowhere. In fact, this is what Otto wants. He's searching for a way into the Nowhere. He wants to find his sister Cece, who also went missing in this way. At one point, Otto manages to have a conversation with the ferryman, the mysterious character who brings the children to the Nowhere. Speaking through Noon, the ferryman tells Otto that he's too old to travel there. He is But this also makes complete sense if you think about it. The Nowhere is accessed through the mind, and one of the major differences between children and adults is their imagination. This is something that is often said is lost as we grow up. A great example of this is imaginary friends. If a child was to have an imaginary friend, it would be fine, but we would expect them to eventually grow out of it. If an adult had an imaginary friend, well, they would be labeled crazy. This is basically the plot of Drop Dead Fred. Great movie, by the way. But this is where things get really, really interesting. Imaginary friends are an example of the concept of tulpa. Now, tulpa or tulpas have origins in Buddhism, but in layman's terms, they are things that are manifested into being from our minds. Imagine if that imaginary friend actually became real. This is exactly what I believe the Nowhere is. It's a place that begins in the minds of children, but is eventually manifested into becoming real. But there is actually a huge piece of evidence for this that goes...
That's insanely crazy, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you. Like thinking about that is crazy, bro. Concept, bro. That's insane, bro. This world is so unique, and I ain't gonna lie to you. Like, wow. It's like, bro. Good, bro. I can't wait, bro.
Back to Little Nightmares 2. The main villain of Little Nightmares 2 is the Thin Man. I mean, or arguably 6, depending on your point of view, but bear with me. The Thin Man is clearly a nod to Slender Man. Thin, slender, they even have the same sort of outfit. They also both abduct people, particularly children. But the Slender Man is also a tulpa. He was created online, based on some previous works by those such as H.P. Lovecraft. But one of the defining features of the Slender Man is that his lore developed by those who believe in him. This became known as the Tulpa effect. Essentially, if enough people believe in something, it can become real. Tarsia were giving us huge hints about this with the Thin Man, but now, since we know that the Nowhere begins in the mind but is later brought into being, it makes perfect sense as to why this world is so abstract and jumbled. Everything here was born in dreams and nightmares. Everything in the nowhere is something that a child imagined. This is why we have such a stark contrast between the nightmarish and the alluring. These are all things that children might dream of, or might have nightmares of. This is why everything around the children is so big. The world does feel big to a small child. This is why we see so many portraits that show completely random images. These are fragments of dreams and memories, but not just of one child, of many. Every single child who has ever dreamt of this place has added their own influence to it. All the creatures that exist here have one of two origins. Either they were dreamt up by someone with a vivid imagination, or they traveled here in their dreams. This has huge implications for characters such as the lady. Maybe the reason why she is so powerful is that she was one of the children who ended up trapped here, just like Mono and Six. The reason why she seems more intelligent than the lumbering guests is because she was a real human and these were born from nightmare. Maybe this even explains why she's so sad. She originally came here as a child, but she grew up here, slowly being twisted and transformed by the nowhere. This could also explain why she came to the moor in the first place. She came here looking for answers, looking for ways to escape the nowhere and return to her own home. In fact, this gives me a much more satisfying story than Six becoming the lady, something that I have never thought is true, by the way. But
Yeah,
if
I
the
didn't think
lady
that
began
either.
her journey looking for a way to escape the nowhere, eventually coming to the
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you. I didn't think that either, just because of just the reason is like the abilities are different. The Sixley eats people and becomes, I guess, stronger in a sense. Like her body's like really hungry and stuff, you know? And like it doesn't change even after the game is over. She's still hungry, you know? At least I think she's still hungry. I don't really remember. It's been a while since I beat the game. Um but before actually playing the third one, I might just have to be I might just replay both of them just to get them both in my memory. And but I do want to say this though, like it's just the abilities and just I don't think like really I'll be how she'll be like when she grows up fully. Like I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it didn't really feel right thinking those two are like the same person. But I did like the idea though. I won't say I didn't like it. It was interesting. So I did like the idea because how interesting it would be if they was the same person. But again, it'd be like why are you attacking yourself in a sense, you know? Uh, like you know what I mean? But that's the same concept of um the second game when people thought or no, because he does become the little slinky guy. Hmm, interesting.
moor to find the dark powers that she thought might help, well, this makes her ending very poignant. Once the dark powers that she thought might help, well, this makes her ending very poignant. Once Six forces her to look into the mirror, to look at what she has truly become, she gives up. She sees the monster she truly is, and she realizes she can never return to her home. This world has changed her too much, and she's now a part of it. Now compare this with Six's journey. At the start of Little Nightmares 2, Six has similarly given up. She's making no attempt to escape at all. But by the end of Little Nightmares 2, she's willing to do whatever it takes to survive again, even dropping Mono and then killing the lady. Six and the lady's stories are mirrored. But while this is all a pretty great explanation for the nowhere, there is still a massive plot point that I haven't talked about. Since we now have good evidence that the nowhere is shaped by those who dream of it, we have one major character who I think has had a huge impact on the areas we'll visit in Little Nightmares 3, Noon. As I said earlier, the Candy Factory has a major significance that nobody is talking about. One of the major reasons why Noon gives in and accepts the nowhere is because of how evil Otto is. All throughout the audio series, Otto is pretending to help Noon with her nightmares. While it's made pretty obvious to us that all he really cares about is getting to the nowhere to find his sister. But Otto really is monstrous. Not only is he keeping his real intentions secret, but after every single session, he offers Noon candy. As he says it,
sweets for my sweet.
Sweets is of course what we call candy in England, but these sweets hide a dark secret. You see, at first it seems like Otto is just trying to persuade Noon, using the sweets as a sort of reward in a very creepy sort of way. But it turns out that those sweets were actually laced with sedatives. Of course, Otto was forcing Noon to take sedatives so she would sleep more deeply. He was forcing her into the nowhere so he could study it. She came to him to try and stop her nightmares, but all he did was push her further and further into them. Now, since we know that the nowhere is influenced by people's dreams, the candy factory suddenly takes on a darker meaning. And if you thought that was just a coincidence, take a look at this image posted on the Little Nightmares Twitter. Those same sweets have that spiral marking. But even that in itself is no coincidence. The nowhere is a product of the children's minds, but it seems like the more broken the mind, the more easily the children can travel there. As these children slowly descend into madness, so too they descend into the nowhere. They quite literally spiral. The word spiral has often been used to describe a way in which our minds can slip out of control. We call this a downward spiral. Once again, those who travel to the nowhere describe it as a sinking feeling. This is very similar to Alice in Wonderland. You have to be mad to travel there. But while that world is very ambiguous, we don't know how much is in Alice's mind and how much is actually real, the nowhere is now much less so. What is perfectly clear is that the only people who would choose to stay in a world like this must be in some way crazy or desperate. All we need to figure out now is what entity is pulling them into it and why. I definitely think that the spiral we're going to visit in Little Nightmares 3 is going to be just that, a descent or spiral into madness. We can even see this from the trailers. At first the game seems sunny and a lot more bright than we're used to. But as we progress through the game, as we spiral, the game's going to become much more dark, much more dreary, and much more what we're used to. I think this is the best explanation for the world of Little Nightmares yet, and you know when the third game releases I'll be looking for clues of Noon's influence. That being said, I'll be doing a playthrough over on the second channel before I delve into the madness that is Little Nightmares theories once again. It has been a long time since I've had new Little Nightmares content to theorize over, and I for one can't wait.
Bruh, I appreciate y'all giving me a little bit of your time and watching this with me. The video will be linked in the description down below, so please go support the creator. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the video, and this was really interesting, so I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I can't wait for the game to come out. Can't wait to play it and show y'all the game too, you know? Like, 1000%. I can't wait, bro. It's gonna be so much fun.